In the last lecture, we looked at types of remedies, and we saw that remedies for breach of contract could be common law remedies or they could be equitable remedies, and we saw the distinction between the two. In this lecture, I intend to focus on the common law remedy first because that is what the judges do as well. If they're handling a case of breach of contract, they will first try to grant the innocent party a common law remedy, and only if they feel that common law remedy would not do justice to the innocent party, only then would they grant an equitable remedy. Common law remedies, as we saw in the last lecture, were rather rigid. They were inflexible. They followed certain prescribed rules. And if your case fell within those prescribed rules, you would get your remedy, otherwise you wouldn't. For the most part, common law remedies was about money, compensation. That's what common law was about. So if you have been wronged in the sense that you had a contract with somebody and that somebody breached that contract and now you have come to the court, the common law approach was to compensate you for any loss that you have suffered in the process. We will see sometimes innocent party does not want compensation. For example, the innocent party may want that the guilty party, the other party to the contract, should be forced to complete the contract, should not be allowed to get away with it. He should not be allowed to buy his way out. He should not be allowed to just compensate and walk away. So innocent party may decide that no, I don't want compensation. I want the guilty party to be asked, to be ordered to fulfill his obligation. That's what I want. I don't want compensation. Unfortunately, common law did not have that option. In common law, the only remedy that was available was money-based remedy. There were different types of remedies, but they were all money-based. So if a person were to go to a common law court and just ask for a remedy, the common law court had only money-based remedies to grant to him. That is to say, compensation primarily. Which is fine, because that's what majority of the people want. But as I said, not everybody. For those other people who did not want compensation, we will see that there are equitable remedies. Okay, we'll have a separate lecture on those people who do not want compensation. They would want some other form of remedy. But since majority of the people only look for compensation in such cases, common law would satisfactorily serve that purpose, and the remedy of compensation, the legal word, the legal title for it is damages. So you would go to the court if money is what you're looking for. If you have suffered some harm because of the other person's breach of contract and you want compensation for it, you would simply go to the court and you would ask for damages. There are certain rules that the courts follow in deciding whether damages are to be given to you, and if so, how much damages are to be given to you. We'll look at these rules in 3 distinct steps. If you know these 3 steps, you would have understood the court's approach towards grant of damages. And the 3 steps are these. These are the 3 things that the judges keep in mind when they are faced with a case where somebody is asking for compensation for breach of contract. The first thing that the judges have to decide is whether or not to grant compensation. It is not enough for judges that there has been a breach of contract. It is not enough for judges whether or not you have suffered because of that breach. The judge first and foremost has to see that despite the breach and despite the fact that you have suffered some harm, should they even be allowing compensation to you? This determination is done under a head that is called remoteness of damages. The first thing that the judges will see is whether the loss that you have suffered is such that the judges should even compensate you for it. Remember, we are talking about contract law. You and the other party got into a contract. There were certain expectations. There was certain understanding on which your contract was based. If there has been a breach of contract, that's bad, of course. If you have suffered because of it, that's even worse. But that is not to say that whatever loss you have suffered, no matter how unthinkable, no matter how unforeseeable, we should ask the guilty party to compensate you for it. We need to see that this compensation has to be premised in concept of fairness. So the first thing that the courts consider when they're deciding whether or not to give you damages is to apply the test of remoteness of damages. And quite simply what this means is the courts will see that the loss that you're now claiming compensation for, was that loss foreseeable at the time of contract or not? Or is it the case that the loss that you've suffered is so unforeseeable, so strange, so unique in nature, that perhaps nobody could have thought of this kind of a loss? If it is completely an unthinkable kind of a loss that you've suffered, the courts will not grant you compensation, because to grant you compensation for a loss that nobody could have thought of, that would be quite an unfair burden on the guilty party. Yes, he has breached the contract. Yes, he should suffer because of it, but that suffering has to be within the realms of reason. That suffering has to be according to the parameters laid down in civil law. So your responsibility, first and foremost, when you go to a court claiming compensation for a breach of contract, is to first satisfy the court that not only has there been a breach and not only have you suffered a loss, but that loss is a foreseeable loss. When you go back to the time when the contract was being negotiated, when the contract was being agreed, you need to show that it was foreseeable for the parties, for yourself and for the defaulting party, that you could suffer this kind of a loss if there was going to be a breach. How do you show that? Well, there's a test that the law has laid down. All you have to do is to satisfy the test. The case on the point is Hadley versus Baxendale. It's an English case. And that case makes it clear what is it that a claimant needs to show to the court in order to be able to get compensation. And what Hadley and Baxendale says is this: you can get your compensation, or at least satisfy the test of remoteness, if you can convince the court that the loss that you're claiming compensation for is so obvious, it's so natural, that if we were to ask anybody, if we were to place the facts of the case before anybody, and if we were to ask that random person that, look, this is what the contract is, this is what I agreed to do, this is what he agreed to do, he has not done his part of the contract, this is the loss that I have suffered, do you think that the loss that I have suffered is something that anybody could have foreseen? Do you think that the loss that I have suffered is so obviously connected with the breach of the contract that you would agree that this is a loss that is arising in the natural course of events? If that random person were to agree that yes, of course, even though I'm not a party to the contract, I have heard what you're saying, and after having heard you guys, I am of the opinion that yes, if the breach was to happen, the loss that you're claiming was a natural consequence. It's a foregone conclusion. This is the kind of breach this is the kind of loss that would have happened anyway. If that test is satisfied, if you're able to show to the judge that the loss is a natural loss, anybody would have known about it. And of course, anybody here includes the defaulting, the guilty party as well. Therefore, you will have done your bit, and you will have proven to the judge that the loss is one that should be compensated. So for example, if you are traveling to Islamabad by PIA, and you have a contract with PIA, you have purchased the ticket, but PIA refuses to perform its part of the contract, that is to say, it refuses to take you to Islamabad, or fails to take you to Islamabad because of flight cancellation or whatever the reason. It's natural that you would suffer some loss because you have missed that flight. what are those natural losses? That if you were to ask a random person, even he would say that, of course, these are the losses that you would suffer. Well, for one, you would obviously, the price that you had paid for the ticket, that would go to waste. So PIA definitely should be compensating you for the price of the ticket. There should be a refund. It's natural. You didn't travel. You should get your money back. Everybody will agree. Secondly, you must have suffered some stress, because obviously if you were traveling to Islamabad, it stands to reason that there was a reason why there was a purpose why you were traveling to Islamabad, and since you couldn't travel, there would be some amount of stress that you underwent. There should be some compensation for that also. It's natural. I think if you were to ask anybody, that would a passenger whose flight was cancelled suffer some stress? The answer would pretty much be yes, some stress, yes, that's a natural. It may also be that you would want to claim for loss of time. The reason why you were traveling to Islamabad, but now you were not able to, you lost some time. How much and how significant was that loss, that we can debate upon. But certainly, I think if you were to ask a random person that a passenger who has missed his flight through no fault of his own because of flight cancellation, is it natural that he would have lost some amount of time? He would say, yeah, some amount of time for sure. How much, that is a different story, but some amount of time for sure. So these are the kind of losses that we say are natural. But what would not be natural is, for instance, if you were traveling to Islamabad for a specific purpose of a job interview, and because you were not able to travel, you missed that job interview. And because you missed the job interview, you were not considered for the job. Now, if you want PIA to compensate you for that missed opportunity, if you want PIA to compensate you for the job that you never got, that the court will not allow you. Because we don't know. We don't know if a random person on the street, if he were asked whether, if there's a case of a flight cancellation, will the passenger naturally, as a matter of course, will miss job interview or not? Chances are the random person will actually say, no, it's not natural. It's not obvious. People don't just travel only because of job interview. People travel for many other reasons. Some people travel because they may be tourists. Other people might be traveling to meet family. Some people might be traveling to meet friends. There might be other commitments there. So not everybody travels for job interview. And so therefore, if you were to ask a random person on the street, he would not agree that the natural consequence of a flight cancellation is somebody missing out on the opportunity of getting a job. That's not natural. And because it's not natural, you would not be able to claim for that loss. But the claim for mental stress, the claim for loss of time, the claim for a refund of the ticket, because those are all naturally arising losses, you would be allowed to get compensation for them. But does this mean that you can never get compensation for the missed job interview? Not really. Headley and Baxendale also makes it clear that if you're not able to show that a loss was naturally arising, you might still get compensation if you can at least show that you had told PIA about the job interview. So maybe your loss was not naturally arising, but you had still told the other party at the time of the contract that, look, if you do not perform your part of the contract, this is a special kind of a loss that I will suffer. And if the other party was made aware of that special kind of a loss, if PIA was made aware that you would miss the job interview, and despite that PIA cancelled the flight, now the court would say, PIA, you are responsible, you were aware. Even though it's not a naturally arising loss, it's not a loss that any random person would agree that is a matter of course, but you, PIA, were told. And so therefore now we will not allow you to claim ignorance, and you need to compensate. How PIA will compensate, that would be the subject of our next lecture. Because the next step, once remoteness is done, once this whole foreseeability tests are applied, the next step for the court in deciding damages is to measure the damages, quantify the damages. That is the subject of my next lecture.